Hey everybody, this is Freddy with LeviathanScuba.com. We are continuing the Leviathan video series on how to stretch a tank longer. And what I mean by that is how to get more dive time underwater. Be more efficient with your air, conserving whatever you want to call it. We're going to make a change from, we've been talking about all the equipment-based things you can do to increase your dive time underwater. Now we're going to switch over to the skills that it takes to stretch a tank a little bit longer, including the number one skill anyone can do to make their dive last longer. We'll get to that in just a minute. My first tip in the skills category is relax. It sounds just so cliche, but what I mean by this is, if you've already been on a dive trip, you know what I'm talking about. The dive boat's a little crazy, you're getting your gear assembled, everybody just got their wetsuits on and they're hurrying up. And, is my air on? Where's my fins? Did I defog my mask? You're kind of in a stressful mode getting ready to be jumping into the water. Everybody's shuffling up to the end of the boat and then they jump in, right? And you're kind of frazzled just a little bit. Your heart rate's going, you're breathing a little harder, even if you're not aware of it, and you jump in the water. And I share this tip with people just to make the dive experience so much better. But it really does help improve the amount of air you get out of a scuba tank and how long you get to dive. So if you have the opportunity on this dive, sink to the bottom, if it's not deep, right, on the sand, kneel down and do nothing but relax for 3 minutes. That's what I tell people, the first 3 minutes. It's going to make your tank last a lot more than 3 minutes longer in the long run. You're not trying to keep up with people, you're not trying to do this and that, and you're not frazzled. Just that relaxation. It's one of my favorite parts of the dive. I kind of use it to wait for people if I jump in the water first, and then I relax and I just sit there and I breathe. Make sure I'm all put together, everything's good, and then I'm relaxed and I don't feel like I'm behind the 8 ball. It's kind of like leaving your house late for work in the morning and you grab it and you forgot your coffee in the microwave and all that kind of crazy stuff. You're frazzled for the rest of the day. But if you can get there a little early, relax, drink your coffee, get in the car, go, leisure, your day seems so much better. So it's the same kind of thing that I'm talking about. The next thing is, when you're training, and for you newer divers, diving in a swimming pool is one thing, but diving in the ocean sometimes is another. And there are things that can cause a little bit of anxiety, right? You see your first shark? Wow, you think your heart is going to race a little bit faster? Sure. Your first night dive? Maybe it's your first dive period, jumping off the back of a boat into blue water, looking down and seeing nothing. So, part of that relaxation, it follows you into the different kinds of dives too, right? So it's up to you to control your experience a little bit. If you're uncomfortable, don't go. If you're comfortable, ask people around you for some advice, things like that, you're good to go. And for you divers that, have some dives under your belt, a little bit more experience, then, we do it because of the thrill. But some of the things can make you go through your air so much faster. So they're not exactly the same thing. When I say that, I mean slow down. This isn't the beginning of the dive, the first 3 minutes, relax that I'm talking about. I'm saying actually slow down. If you're in a hurry, speed, you breathe faster, right? You move fast, you breathe fast. You move slow, you breathe slow. So try to slow down, go relax at a relaxed pace, keep up with everybody so you're not, looking up and they're gone and you have to zoom ahead because then you end up using so much more air. And then you'll have a much better dive too. Now, this next thing is a no-brainer, but it's not an easy thing to accomplish. It's buoyancy control. When I mean buoyancy control, I mean this. If you are overweighted, you're a little heavier, and you've put air in your BC, you've now used up more air. Not only to add the air there, but you're swimming differently. You're not completely horizontal. If you're overweighted, you're swimming a little bit like a seahorse. And your buoyancy control makes a big difference. So I'm going to say that most divers, when they first get trained, to first get certified, they were overweighted in the pool on purpose because the instructors teaching 5 or 6 students at a time in the pool, it's difficult to keep track of all of you if you're floating on the surface. And so we overweight you just a little bit, and then we offset that with air. The problem with that is people think that that's the correct way to do it. I'm going to say this. Now, I don't want the trolls leaving me bad comments down there. I'm generally speaking here, but don't add air to your BC. If you have true buoyancy control and you're truly neutral, you will hover. And then you will inhale to rise, exhale to sink. Then you don't have to add air to your BC, because the problem with buoyancy control and using up air is you're constantly fighting the negatively buoyancy, the negative. The deeper you go, the more air you need to add. You're 30 feet, you're 60 feet, you add more. You're 90 feet, you add more. And then on the way up, it becomes buoyant. Now you got to dump it. Now you got to dump it. You got to keep dumping, and you're constantly fighting with that. Not only are you using air that you could be breathing, but you are fighting. It's not comfortable. When I teach buoyancy to some of my relatives and friends and things like that, I disconnect the BC altogether. It's much more important to get the weight perfect so you can be neutrally buoyant without a drop of air in your BC. I can compensate with my lungs as I'm diving down to, say, 90 feet without ever adding a drop of air in your BC. Think about it. Many of us have been diving long enough before they invented the BC. Yes, I've been diving that long. How did we do it before they ever had a BC? You had nothing to add air to, right? When I first started diving, they would give you a horse collar, but it was an emergency device that you'd pop the CO2, it would fill all the way up, and you'd head for the surface. You had to practice getting your air out of your lungs fast because you couldn't really control it that well. That wasn't safe. That's why they invented the BC. But you can dive without any air in your BC at all. I would say practice that. Take a buoyancy class if this is tough for you. You want to get perfectly buoyant underwater. You will use so much less air. It's so much more of a comfortable, fun, enjoyable dive as well. Okay? And you'll use less weight, so you won't have to constantly fight it. So swimming horizontal is a key skill. If you look around you, a lot of people don't do it. Why? Because they're overweighted. They're not truly neutrally buoyant. So if they're swimming with their head up, they're heavy. They're actually sinking and counteracting that sinking by kicking upwards at the same time as trying to go forward. Well, they're not very hydrodynamic that way. If you were this way, you go through the water so much easier than if you go like this, or even a degree of that, right? Opposite is if you're too light, you're kind of head down, you're still a scoop, and you're not very hydrodynamic that way. Okay? Now here's another thing, the kicking style that you might call bicycle kicking. You don't want to do that. Okay? Most people, when you look at them, they're really kicking a lot like this. They're getting a terrible thrust from their fins. They could have the best fin in the world and they're not utilizing it near to its most efficient way to kick. You're supposed to kick like so. Technically, if you had a brace on your knees so you couldn't even bend your knees at all, that's the best way. But most of us are not in that good a shape to kick like that, swivel at the hips and get that big thrust. So what do? We bend our knees a little bit. Well, you will see people bending their knees a lot, and they are bicycling, and that is the worst kick you can do. It is not efficient in any way, shape, or form, and you are using up so much air going nowhere. Another type of that would be when people are on the surface. If it's at the end of the dive, then you're done. Who cares? You already used your air up. But when you're waiting for people, do you have your BC with some air in it? Or are you treading water and you're kicking? And most people on the surface will bicycle. And again, it's not very efficient, and they're increasing their heart rate, and they are using up their air. So no bicycle kicking, sorry. Okay? Now, if it's really important for you to get your breathing down right, you can actually do some breathing exercises. Many people practice the yoga style breathing, which is slow and methodic, and that works very well for scuba diving. You will find that people that do free diving as well, where they learn to hold their breath. Pause. Don't hold your breath when you're scuba diving. That's not what I'm talking about. But those people that train to hold their breath for a long time, they're diving down deep with no scuba gear, and they can hold their breath sometimes for 3 or 4 minutes. And they can get there pretty quickly with a little bit of free dive training. Well, those people make excellent scuba divers also, because they can get a very good use of the breath that they have, okay? That being said, you don't hold your breath when you're scuba diving. That's not the point I'm trying to make. They're just conditioned themselves to use their oxygen better, and they make better divers, and their tanks last a little bit longer, okay? Whoops. Equipment malfunction. The next portion is partying the night before. You're on vacation, you're having a great time, and diving with a hangover, you use more air. I'm just saying. Okay, that being said, hydration helps. It actually makes you more efficient in your breathing, and you use less air. So drinking a lot of water during the day while you're diving is excellent, but coming to the table in the morning a little bit dehydrated, perhaps from overconsumption of alcohol or partying too hard or staying up too late, you're going to use more air. Okay, I'm just saying. That being said, to counteract that, sometimes people will drink an energy drink in the morning, have a couple of cups of coffee before their dive, get you in the mood, ready to go. But do know that as your heart rate elevates artificially from the caffeine, you are going to use more air going through your tank a little bit faster. Okay? In the next video, we're going to continue with some of the skills needed for stretching your tank longer, conserving your air. I sure hope this helps you, because that's why we do it. Consider checking out LeviathanScuba.com. Make it a great day. You know, the difference between a new diver and an experienced diver is quite often the tips and the tricks they learn along the way. That's why we share these things with you. We hope that it helped you in some way. And you know, you can help us if you'll just hit that like button down below. And if you can think of anybody else that might benefit from these, why don't you try sharing it? That'll help get the word out. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, and we'll let you know when the next one comes out. Have an awesome day.